CPSUs, our ministers from our states, from the state of UP, Nandgopal Nandiji, who was earlier Civil Aviation Minister as well, from Madhya Pradesh, Sahab Rajwardhan Singh Ji Dattigaon, from Orissa, Praful Kumar Malik Sahib, all representatives from different states present here today, members of my ministry, Secretary Sahab, Sanjay Singh Ji, Ruchika Ji, Sukriti Ji, as well as all our CMDs of our CPSUs present here today, friends from the media. It indeed is a pleasure and an honor for me to welcome you to the Steel Ministers Conference being held in New Delhi today. I think it's important for us to strategically sit together and to be able to analyze the path forward in a spirit of teamwork and cooperation. India has traversed a long journey over the last 8 years in the sector of steel. From a country that used to be a net importer of steel, we have now graduated to becoming a net exporter of steel. From the 4th largest producer of steel 8 years ago, on a global scale, we are today the 2nd largest producer of steel. We are not only the 2nd largest producer of steel, but we are also the 2nd largest consumer of steel. And if we look at some of the data and the numbers, they certainly are extremely astounding. On a per capita basis, we at one point of time, our per capita consumption was a low 57.8 kgs per person, almost lower than small countries like Venezuela and Egypt. Since then, in the last 8 years, we have increased our consumption by almost 50% to 78 kgs per capita. On the capacity side, we have grown from roughly about 100 million tons per annum installed capacity to almost 150 million tons installed capacity, a growth of almost 50%. And similarly, auctioning new mines is something that is the need of the hour. The third area where we need to look at in terms of raw materials is our logistics. And the fact is that we need to ramp up capacity, because today for every single million ton of steel that we produce, we need to transport almost 3 to 4 tons of raw material. And I think that's why it's important to look at alternatives such as slurry pipelines, conveyors, which are closer to the raw material pithead to be able to transport that raw material. The fourth, and undeniably a reality that stares us in the face, is to look at the option of scrap. Now, scrap today is limited. So therefore, you've got to look at a complementary strategy as well as a substitution strategy. In order to substitute scrap, one of the easiest alternatives is to look at sponge iron. And the fact is that today India is the largest producer of sponge iron in the world, with a capacity of almost 49 million tons and a production rate of almost close to 39 million tons, which must go to about 80 million tons by 2030-31. So almost more than double our current capacity. We've also introduced the steel scrap recycling policy in 2019, where we need to put up metal scrapping centers to make sure that we process and recycle specifically end-of-life vehicles. And you will be surprised to know that in our country we have almost close to about 30 lakhs to a crore worth of scrappable vehicles. And we need to put in the policy rubric to be able to get that in as raw material for steel. Because the time is not afar when we will have to move towards green steel. And therefore the option of iron ore, the option of coking coal will not be available to us anymore. And therefore recycling is something that is no longer only the need of the hour. It has become an imperative. And therefore I'd like to urge our states to put in place the process and procedures through your respective RTOs. And this is something that we have engaged with MORT, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, to engage with each of your counterparts in your states, to put in place the process within each RTO to make it easier for scrap dealers to talk to you that many of your states, through companies set up in those states, have applied. 79 applications have been received from 35 companies, totaling almost an investment of 42,030 crores, looking at a capacity addition of almost 26 million tons over the next 5 to 7 years, and looking at job creation of almost 70,000 direct and indirect jobs. Tremendous opportunity for all of us to take advantage of. And along with the PLI scheme, I think we are set as we enter the Amrit Kal to the Shatabdi Kal era of India's development. And therefore we have to look at India at 2047. Our policies have to be aimed at that, our production levels have to be aimed at that, our environment sustainability norms have to be aimed at that. And while I talk about environment sustainability, the Prime Minister from the Red Fort on the 15th of August 2021 highlighted the issue of the circular economy. It's very important for us to understand that we cannot be at odds with nature anymore. We have to share a symbiotic relationship with nature. And therefore preserving nature, ensuring that we are not violating nature, must become our cornerstone of our policy in the days to come. It's also very important to understand that the linear model of economic growth cannot work anymore. And what is the linear model? The linear model is one in which you follow a policy of take, make and dispose. That policy today has become redundant across the world, and I think the earlier we accept that, the better it will be. Natural resources are obviously finite, and therefore we must look at a new policy framework wherein we recycle, we respect nature, and I'm glad to report that under the Zero Waste, Zero Harm policy project between Niti Aayog and the Government of India, we have produced the first national highway being made with steel slag. This also not only saves rupees in terms of cost of construction, but it also increases the life of the road and is environmentally sustainable. And therefore, when we talk about the circular economy, it's more than just recycling. It's about energy consumption. Because at the end of the day, when you extract metal, you produce production basis. The growth has been tremendous from 80 MTPA to almost 121 MTPA at last count. And therefore, we've come a long way in these last 8 years. And that progress has also been defined in many ways with a huge thrust on reforms in the sector of mining. Our emphasis from Government of India in the sector of mining has been threefold. First is to make sure that we increase our mining production. Second is to increase investment into the mining sector. And third is to increase the extraction rate of minerals from those mines. So I think the three-pronged principle in the sector of mining has also resulted in greater raw material for our sector, which is steel. So when I talk about raw material, though we have progressed a long way, we also are still faced with an innumerable amount of challenges. And this is where I would like the support, proactive teamwork from state governments as well. If if you look at our primary raw material between iron ore and coking coal, today 85% of our coking coal requirement is imported. Even though India has close to about 34 billion tons of coking coal reserve. And therefore I think that to be able to grow that capacity from the current 58 million tons to 139 million tons per annum should be our primary objective. If you combine that with also a diversification strategy, because many times the ash content of our coking coal is extremely high, and therefore to be able to get the requisite amount of quality coking coal from other countries neighboring us is something that we should look at as a strategy base. The second is the area of iron ore. There are sufficient reserves available. The mining capacity is also adequate. But according to our National Steel Policy of 2017, we will require close to about 437 million tons of iron ore per year by 2030. And in this breakup, the ISPs alone, integrated steel plants, will require almost about 195 million tons. India is putting together a coking coal mission plan. Diversification of our sources of coking coal from Mozambique to Russia to South Africa to Mongolia are being looked at. Along with that, we are also looking at coal gasification. India is the largest coal gasification based iron and steel producer in the world today. And this will replace coking coal with thermal coal. Along with this, we also want to look at production of steel through hydrogen. And along with production of steel through hydrogen, the use of gas produced from coal gasification, which is called syngas. And therefore, we must follow the technology curve, looking towards greener aspects, looking towards circular economy. We have also believed in the concept of a whole of government approach at the Ministry of Steel here. We have been in dialogue with the Ministry of Power, the Ministry of Railways, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Finance over myriad issues that are concerning to our sector. We are deriving solutions from that process, and therefore this too is a step in that engagement with all of you, because I do believe that when all of us as stakeholders work together, the private sector, the public sector, state governments, central governments, in all your success lies our success, and in all your success lies India's success. So with those words, let me welcome you to the Steel Ministers Conference, and I look forward to many interesting discussions throughout our day, and many nuggets that we can gain from all your perspectives to chart a common path forward to make sure that India grows in the sector of steel production in the world. Thank you very much.
माननीय मंत्री जी के इस उद्बोधन के बाद मैं इस्पात मंत्रालय के सचिव श्री संजय कुमार साहब को आमंत्रित करता हूँ कि वे विशेष प्रस्तुति के द्वारा स्टील सेक्टर की सारी उपलब्धियों, कमियों और आगे की आवश्यकताओं के बारे में हमें रूबरू कराएं। सर।
Thank you, Sakeshji. There is a brief presentation in which I am going to highlight on what Honorable Minister has just elaborated. Where we are right now, where we are going to proceed, what we are foreseeing the future is going to be of steel sector, and what kind of collaborations we require from the state government and all those who are present here today. माननीय मंत्री जी के द्वारा स्टील सेक्टर अभी के बारे में जो हमें जानकारी दी कि हम प्रोडक्शन में, उत्पादन में नंबर 2 पर हैं, कंजम्पशन में नंबर 2 पर हैं। ये जो अभी आप तो स्लाइड देख रहे हैं कि आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के द्वारा हम 75 साल भारतवर्ष के इंडिपेंडेंस के, स्वतंत्रता के हो चुके हैं। हम 100 वर्ष की ओर बढ़ रहे हैं। तो 75 से 100 वर्ष का जो समय है, ये अमृतकाल। इस अवधि में हमें डेवलपिंग नेशन से डेवलप्ड नेशन बनना है।